the status, the numbers show actually that some of the survivors who have undergone, let's say, SGBV this year, when we're talking about the teenage pregnancies and things like that, are people who have undergone abuse before. So, because if you have been abused, or if you are a survivor of sexual violence, it already increases your risk of undergoing it again. So if you're going back home, because Kenya right now has a problem with shelters as well as safe houses for survivors, you're being, taken back to the same environment where you were attacked. Of course, it increases the risk of you undergoing the same sexual assault or sexual violence or whatever it is that you underwent. So of course, there's certain instances whereby it actually increases your risk. And of course, I'm only speaking on the basis of statistics, just to show that it's possible for the numbers to be higher in certain instances, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen, for example, in January, because there's no holidays and things like that. So yeah, I hope you understand how usually potential risks work when it comes to SGBV.
Thank you very much, Marion. Actually, that's true. Yesterday, if you watched the news, it was actually saddening that a father raped the daughters. So there is no one actually to trust. You shouldn't trust anyone. And also men are victims to rape. So it's actually sad. And actually this year, the numbers of early pregnancies have been so high because of being at home, most girls. So that's true. So my next question goes to Corporal Caroline. What are the steps to take when one is afflicted to sexual violence?
Now, when one is afflicted to such violence, the first steps we take are, we advise them to seek medication, because you find in most cases, some of the perpetrators maybe are affected with diseases. So the first steps we take are, we advise the affected people to seek medical attention, and thereafter we encourage them to make a follow-up on the cases to assist in apprehending the offenders. And in most cases, you even find that the affected people, who are mostly the children, young girls, are affected. So we advise them to seek counseling. For instance, early July, I had a case of a small girl aged 5 years who was raped by her father. The girl was appearing so much traumatized. She was admitted in Nairobi Women for almost 5 days. And we had to arrest the man who was already jailed for 35 years. So we advised them to get counseling, whereby we are very happy because Nairobi Women are issuing these services free of charge. They are not charged anything, so everyone is able to get the medication and any action that is needed. So we also advise them to make a follow-up on the matters, because some of them are being compromised in the villages. They don't even make follow-ups of the cases whenever they report, hence making our work difficult. But we encourage them to make a follow-up of the cases whenever they are reported at the police stations. Yes, that is it.
So Maya, if I may just add something from the legal perspective, right? Of course, everything that Corporal Caroline has said is super important, but I just wanted to ask to give a few points, not really points, but just some information for any survivor out there regarding how to ensure that any evidence that they may have is not tainted, which will enable them to access justice later on when the case is being prosecuted. So of course, after the attack happens, the first thing you need to do is get medical attention, as you've just heard. But after that, it's important, before you even get there, you're advised to make sure that you do not tamper with the evidence. And the best way to do this is you don't wash your hair, don't wash your clothes, don't take a shower. And if you're storing where you're storing the clothes that you're wearing when you are attacked is also very, very important. So you're advised not to store the clothes in a polythene paper bag, like the paper bags that were banned, yeah? You're advised to actually wrap them in a newspaper, or you wrap them in another cloth to make sure that you don't, evidence is very, very, like it's supposed to be treated in a way that it doesn't taint it, because this is the same evidence is supposed to link the perpetrator to the commission of the attack, and it's also supposed to show that, like the attack actually happened. Because for your case to go forward, you have to show that, now for speaking now with reference to statutory rape, that there was penetration, without consent. So this is whatever you're carrying is whatever your, like the clothes and everything else is what will be used to show that the attack actually happened, and it will actually link the perpetrator to the commission of the attack. Yeah, and also I wanted to share that so many NGOs actually have hotlines. I know there's a hotline for COVA, Coalition of Violence Against Women. There's a hotline for FIDA. FIDA also have an online hotline. So if you're a survivor, and just the way Corporal Caroline had said, if you need, of course, you would definitely, it's advisable to get counseling services, and we understand that counseling services may be expensive and not available for certain people. I will share the hotlines on the, I don't know if I have chat, but yeah, I will share the hotline numbers just for anyone who may be in need, because yeah, they're there to be used. Yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Yes, in addition to that too, it is advisable for the perpetrators to be arrested immediately whenever they are known. And it is also advisable for the victims to report the matter immediately. Although some are experiencing some difficulties because some are worried that maybe some people will know that something bad was done to me. Maybe others, they don't want people to know that something was done to them. So it is advisable for them to report the matter immediately, no matter what people will say about you, for the person to get the justice, for the justice to prevail.
Thank you very much to both of you. Actually, the steps that I have gotten is you have to seek medication, you have to report the matter immediately. Do not be afraid, because the police will actually help you. You encourage them to make a follow-up of the things that have happened. They should seek counseling, because most of them are always underage or young girls. Then they should not tamper with the evidence. And that was my next question. What are the do's and the don'ts to the survivors? But I think you guys have answered. So my next question is, what happens if a 17-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl are caught engaging in sex? Who is at fault in the law? Because all of them don't have consent. They're all underage. So who's at fault? Any of you can go first.
Yes, I can. Okay. Okay, in such issues, we have been having some difficulties and some problems, although sometimes we consult with our prosecutors in court, because you find this age is almost the same. No one has a consent, but they are almost of the same age. In many cases, we take them through counseling, and we talk to their parents, to talk to them, tell them the bad things and the good things for them, because sometimes you get it hard to prosecute either of the two, depending on the age.
So if someone is underage, they're not like arrested, even though they actually are found in premarital sex, and none of them, because no one has consent if you're below 18. So you just canceled your advice, but you're not taken even to juvenile courts.
So Maya, this is such a burning issue. Actually, there are so many cases of so many underage boys who have been arrested, because you've actually said it right. If you look at, for example, if you look at our Sexual Offences Act, it's one of the offences that I had referenced earlier was defilement. So defilement is essentially coercive sexual relations against a minor, and a minor isn't able to give consent, because the age of consent in Kenya is 18 years old. So you find a majority of, okay, not really majority, there's a high number of research right now shows that the sexual debut for teenagers is even as low as between 12 and 14 years old. So teenagers are actually having sex. It's something which we have to accept, right? So there's so many cases of how so many boys who have been arrested, and you find that they've engaged in sexual relations with a fellow minor. So there's actually, for example, there was a constitutional petition which was brought, I think, in 2018 by a boy, a 17-year-old boy at that time, who had engaged in consensual sexual relations with a girl of 16 years old. And he was arrested, but the girl was not arrested. So he brought a constitutional petition on the basis of discrimination, because our constitution provides that, equal treatment regardless of your gender, among other differences. So it's definitely an issue. And actually in that petition, which I believe it's the 2018 one, there's so many which have been brought since then. In that petition, the court actually declared that there was a violation of his right to freedom from discrimination. And right now, the Court of Appeal actually referred the issue to the Supreme Court, because there is need to sort of like engage in discussions regarding the age of consent. And I know it's a very burning issue, and people have very, it's a sensitive issue. And I just want to give an example of how different countries have dealt with it. So for example, in South Africa, the age of consent is not 18, it's I think 16. And what they've done is they've introduced what is called Romeo clauses. So Romeo clauses whereby, for example, if two minors are engaging in consensual, remember, it still has to be consensual sexual relations with each other, it won't be a criminal offense. It won't be taken as defilement like the way it is in Kenya, but you have to be within a certain clause. So you have to be within a certain age bracket, so that it actually doesn't lead to, for example, issues regarding power dynamics, whereby, like a boy is 17 and the girl is 12. Of course, that's not okay. So now the South African context is they've taken it to it's kind of like a case-by-case basis, whereby, for example, a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old girl, 17-year-old boy, 16-year-old girl won't, neither of them will be prosecuted for engaging in consensual sexual relations. So the issue of consent is such a debated, it's like a really big issue. Even if I may raise something else, for example, with reference to withdrawal of consent, like if consent is given after the fact, if consent is given midway, if consent is given, like when you're starting and then in the middle someone withdraws from, giving consent. So there's so many legal issues surrounding it. And interesting enough, there's so many cases that actually answer these questions. So for example, there's a case, I don't want to give the citation because I know most of us here, the legal case itself doesn't matter, it's the content that matters. There's a case whereby the girl had initially given consent and then withdrew. She had given consent to go home with a man. They weren't minors, they were adults. I don't remember the age exactly, but they were adults. So she gave consent to go home with the man, and then upon reaching his house, she withdrew consent. She and said that she's not interested in engaging in any sexual relations with him whatsoever. But the man proceeded and was like, yo, you already, you already said you've given us consent. You've given me consent, so I'm going to proceed. So he actually raped the woman. And then the woman later on filed a case against it, and he was actually charged. But this was now before the introduction of the Sexual Offences Act. Yet you can see the judge in this case was actually very progressive in deciding this judgment. So there's so many issues surrounding consent, and I just want to make it very clear to people that consent must be given. Consent must be given. It must be freely given. So it doesn't matter if you think someone gave you consent and then later on the person withdraws it. It doesn't matter if you feel like the person gave consent 2 days ago and then today. Consent must be given no matter the circumstances. And this is especially for people within this age bracket, because there's so much happening, you know, if I'm being very honest, because I know most of you also know there's so many cases of people taking advantage of women and girls because, you know, they're intoxicated and things like that. So you need to be very, very aware that consent must be given. So if I may give even an example of, for example, the rugby players case, I don't remember the citation, but I don't want to delve into it deeper for respect for the survivor. The case, the two rugby players were actually sentenced because consent was not freely given and she did not have the capacity to give consent. So just remember, consent must be given. Yeah.
Corporal Caroline, do you have anything to add? Consent is so important, but I don't know why they should discriminate the young boy and all of them are underage. They should arrest all of them or withdraw all of them because they're all underage. I don't know why they arrested the guy only, but this is law. Corporal Caroline, you can go ahead.
Yes, in such issues, sometimes we don't arrest one of them. We end up arresting both of them. And the only thing that we opt to do is refer them to the children's office where they are counseled there. Because whenever a child is above 12 years is criminally responsible. So now here we can't judge who forced who to do whatever they did. So what we do, we see the best is sending them to the children's office for advice. And even sometimes we take them to, when we decide to take them to court, they are just treated as children, both of them, and maybe they are sent back to the children's office for counseling. And the parents are advised to tell them on good and bad things.
So what happens, for example, if the lady ends up being pregnant, because all of them are underage, they don't have a source of income, do the parents for the guy take the responsibility or the parents to the lady?
Sometimes we also allow that mutual understanding for both of them to talk and to come to an agreement, because both, when one is at the age of 17 and the other one is at the age of 16, of which sometimes even it becomes vice versa. The girl might be older than the boy, and they did this not intending to get pregnant. They don't know the consequences of doing such things. So the best thing we do is sometimes even we promote that talking, we promote that reconciliation depending on that age. Yes.
Thank you very much. For the audience, feel free to ask your questions on the chat box, then I'll ask the panelists. My next question is, in the past, what mistakes have victims made that made investigations difficult for the police?
If I may answer that, the mistakes that the victims do is failing to report the incident immediately when it occurs. You find them, they take a long time. Even others, like now, the problem that we have, most issues are reported when the parents realize that the girls are pregnant. That is when they come up and start reporting the issues. And when the perpetrators realize that the matter has been reported to police, they run away. So it becomes difficult to trace the perpetrators. Also, settling the matter out of the court. Most of them, when they realize that such issues has occurred, they go for talking. We call these kangaroo courts. They form their courts outside there. They are paid money. So you find the children are not getting their justice, because even you find an old man impregnating a 16 years old girl, and the parents end up being given money. They do away with such cases, of which sometimes this is due to lack of knowledge. Most of people there, they have no knowledge of knowing that when such issues occur, they should report the matter to the police. Now it is the area chiefs, even the village elders, who are forcing these people to come out and report the issues to the police. So you find sometimes even the girls, because most of them, they give in consent to the people. When you try to go and arrest such people, even the girls tell the men that police are coming to arrest you, so you should run away. So it becomes difficult for the perpetrators to be traced, for the girl to get the justice.
If I may just make a comment, and I'm not in any way, I just wanted to give like the other side of the coin, yeah? Because, and I'm not in any way attacking the corporal or the police. I just want, like, from what I've seen from this other side, I think sometimes society is also to blame as to why victims or survivors don't come forward after an attack. And it's not necessarily their fault. So, like, for example, I was reading a report last year, which was conducted between 2016 and 2017, about help-seeking opportunities for survivors of SGBV in Kenya. So essentially, like, whether we have opportunities for survivors to be able to get help in Kenya. And the study was showing that, for example, even when it comes to reporting of cases, some survivors are not given the opportunity. Like, for example, they're sent away, they're told, like, there was an example they were told to go back home and come back the next day, go back home, you know, ama simama hapo nje, kuna kitu tunafanya hapa kwanza, or cases of, like, there's no privacy whatsoever, so you're asked. And sometimes there's also that, like, how you approach the survivor, because, like, an SGBV case is not the same as, for example, robbery. You know, like, those are two different things. There has to be a sort of, like, empathy that you have to give the survivor in order to, like, provide an environment where he or she can be able to actually talk about what happened. So you find, like, there's no privacy. You find, for example, even in some police stations, this is just, like, now me reading and the stories that I've heard, because from, like, CSO perspective, civil society perspective, there's no gender desks, even in some police stations, because SGBV cases are supposed to be reported at the gender desk because of the special. That's why, you know, gender desks were created, so that the survivors can be able to have the opportunity to feel a bit more comfortable to come forward. So there's a lot of, like, even, for example, if I may give there's a constitutional petition that was filed. I'm sorry, I'm going to give so many examples of cases so that you can see, like, I'm speaking from fact. There's a constitutional petition that was filed in 2013 by Cradle, among so many other society, so many, like, organizations. And it's known as the 160 Girls petition. I don't know, maybe it was like one or two people have heard about it. So it was a petition arising from 160 defilement cases in Meru. And they were trying to address the issues regarding lack of prosecution, like following the right steps when it comes to prosecution of SGBV, specifically defilement cases in Meru, but also, like, in Kenya at large, because there are so many instances whereby, and we're talking about defilement. Defilement is for persons under the age of 18, like for children. So there are so many instances whereby the children, both boys and girls, yeah. But this one is, I think, majority were girls. But, for example, the girls went to report the case with a guardian or a parent, and were told, you know, we don't have any way to help you. And this is maybe, like, the perpetrator is, you know, like a close family member, you live in the same house. So, because we know, like, there's so many, the way even the corporate had said, like, so many perpetrators happen to be people in your close proximity. So the survivor now goes to report the case, but you're told, oh, we don't have a safe house, we don't know, we can't help you. It's either you go back or you stay in the cell. That's the only way we can help you. Ukae hapa kwa cell, that's like your safe house, ama urudi pale ulikuwa. So there were so many instances even of young girls being subjected to secondary sexual violence by even police officers themselves, because, you know, just even the manner of handling evidence was basically mediocre, because they didn't follow the steps that you're supposed to follow. So you find that there are so many cases whereby defilement was not being prosecuted, perpetrators were basically not, you know, being followed up, and it also increases the risk for sexual violence in the area, because it's like people are saying, the police are not even taking this thing seriously. So, you know, it's like an opportunity, I'm sorry to say, it's like an opportunity to commit the act, because nothing will be done to you. So it's just sort of like give you perspective of what happens on the ground, and how, and this is happening even now. For example, people are now getting wind of the number of adolescent girls getting pregnant, and I'm purposely using the term adolescent as opposed to teenagers because adolescent inanzia, is it from 9 years old, according to the definition by the UN, all the way to, I think, is it 21? No? 2? I don't remember exactly the age bracket, but adolescent covers a wider spectrum as opposed to teenagers. And you find even instances, and I'm sure so many of you have heard of these cases of even girls aged 9 years old. Like I was at a training about 2 months ago whereby we were being told of a 9-year-old girl who was raped by their nephew and ended up getting pregnant. And she doesn't even have the, like her body has not yet matured to carry the pregnancy to term because this is a 9-year-old girl. So the question arises, how does this girl get help, So many things, of course, when you look at it on the, theoretically, on the law, on the basis of the law, like things may seem like, we're doing great. But when you look at it on the ground, there's so much that still needs to be improved because even we ourselves, we victimize victims, if that makes sense. We actually make them feel ashamed for undergoing an act which is not their fault. So there's definitely a lot that we can do in order to create a safer environment for people to speak up. And this is also aligned with the stigma that's associated with sex, because people don't want to talk about it. So it seems like it's such a taboo even when you bring it up, even when you didn't ask for it. So there's a lot that we can all do, each one of us, in order to create a safer environment so that survivors can be able to speak up. Yeah.
Wow, that's actually nice. I hope the change is going to come like sooner than we think, because these are issues that we face daily. It happens everywhere daily and mostly in remote areas. So my next question is, should the afflicted party take to social media to shame the purported rapist when the investigation is done? And if not, what are the demerits of the survivor going on social media and shaming the perpetrator?
Yes, I think sometimes it is good for them to go to the media for the awareness of the same. Because when such issues are exposed by the media, people may be aware, may get that awareness that whenever these things happens, something can be done. So they might be having fear.
I think for me, I'd add, I'm a human rights activist / lawyer, so I'll always go for the human rights perspective. Yeah, I'd say first and foremost, you have freedom of expression, and that's why even you have Twitter on your phones. That's why you can tweet. That's why you can post on Instagram. That's why you can Snap and TikTok and all these other things, because you have the freedom of expression. So I think there is empowerment in allowing a survivor to be able to go to social media in order to tell her version of the story. Because sadly, sometimes the criminal justice system is not sufficient in providing a solution for the survivor. And sadly, sometimes we do not believe the survivor. So it's definitely a positive, sort of like a positive opportunity for them to be able to share and to just feel like someone is listening to them. And this is now me talking as Marion and not talking as just like a lawyer or whatever. This is just me talking generally. Of course, I feel like there's a lot of empowerment when you go to social media and talk about it. And if I may take this opportunity to also bring about another case, which I think so many people need to know about because it really affected me, not personally, just like reading the judgment. So there was a case a few years ago about sexual harassment and sexual assault, which was filed by 2 ladies. And the case didn't go far because when it comes to prosecution of sexual harassment specifically, there's certain things, like each offense has like ingredients that you have to prove. So there's certain ingredients, for example, when it comes to sexual harassment, that you have to prove when it comes to indecent acts and sexual assault. For example, when you're talking about inappropriately touching, that falls under the ambit of, for example, sexual harassment. So they didn't have, the police asked them for physical evidence, which they did not have, in order to show that the assault actually happened. Because somehow there's also like a sort of like a flaw in our criminal system, because how exactly, if it's just me and the perpetrator, I don't walk around with my camera everywhere like, oh, you know, like just in case someone does something, I'm going to record it. So they didn't have any evidence to show that, you know, the person had done something to them. So even when they were being asked for physical evidence, there was no physical evidence. So the criminal case didn't go anywhere. And after this, actually, they of course went to Twitter, they went everywhere to talk about their frustrations with the prosecution of this case, which didn't go anywhere. So this ultimately led to initiation of a defamation suit by the alleged perpetrator. So the alleged perpetrator now filed a suit saying that, you know, these ladies are claiming that I harassed them or I assaulted them, but they're defaming me, they're lowering my name because now I'm going to be associated as a sexual predator, especially, you know, during this Me Too period, like people have to be, you know, like quote unquote careful, as opposed to like, you know, like before, were you just, anyway, personal abuse aside. So, right, he filed a defamation suit, which actually he succeeded in, and the ladies were later told to pay him compensation for the damages that he like suffered when his name was lowered by the survivors who claimed to have been sexually harassed and assaulted and all that. So it raises the issue of, it is just such a, I find like the handling of the case wasn't necessarily to the best ability, because how do you prove that? How do you, there's sort of like a loophole in our system, in our criminal justice system generally, with reference to proving certain crimes, with understanding the context, because you also need to understand the context with reference to sexual offenses. Sexual SGBV is not to be handled just like any other case. Anyway, I think I have really digressed. So let me take it back to you, Sumaya. It's the passion, forgive me.
You're actually passionate about it. So my next question would be, what are the alternatives if a case is thrown out by the police or the court because of connections? What other alternatives do the victims have?
Sorry, can you please repeat the question?
Or the question is, what other alternatives do the victims have if a case is thrown out by the police or the court because of connections? Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Sumaya.
Okay, fine, thank you. Any of you can go first, either Corporal, Caroline, or Marion.
Sumaya, I think I lost on the way. You may repeat the question.
Okay, fine. My question is, what other alternatives do the victims have if the case is thrown out by the police or the court because of connections? Probably the victim had connections to the judge or the police station they went to, so it was just thrown out. What other alternatives can the victim take for justice to be served?
I think for justice to be served, there are so many ways. Someone can appeal. Someone can go to a court of appeal to appeal if the person affected feels that she or he is not satisfied with the decision that has been made by the court. But this doesn't happen in many occasions. So the best way to do is to go to a court of appeal and appeal for justice to prevail. And even at the police station level, you can go to the office of the ODPP, because they are there and they are there to assist everyone. You can go there, lodge a complaint, and their case will be followed up.
So the victim should not lose hope. They should still continue fighting for what they believe is right and for their justice. That's
Yes,
what I've understood from it.
yes, so long as you are following your right, even if you come to my office, for instance, I, Caroline, you feel that you're not satisfied with my services, we have an OCS there, you go to the OCS office. If you feel that you're not being assisted there, you can go even to the OCPD. If you feel you're not assisted there, you go to the ODPP, and automatically you will be assisted. Yes.
But I think, okay, you should actually go to the next level till you get your justice. But there's some girls, let me use girls because they're the ones who are mostly victims of sexual assault. Most of them are actually naive. They feel like they can't really do it. So what happens to such a situation or scenario? Where the girl is so naive, they don't want to follow up because they don't know the repercussions, or they're not confident enough to continue filing for what is rightly theirs.
I think for the minor ones under the age of 18, they are always supported by their parents. So whenever they go and make their reports, they have people who are supporting them. Even we see some issues, they are brought to the station by the area chief or the community policing people. For instance, I had a case where some girls were being sexually abused by some drunkards. The mother neglected them because their father is mentally ill. So the mother left, leaving the girls aged 12 years and 14 years. They have been sexually abused for almost 7 months, where they were rescued by the community policing officers. And we were able to arrest 5 perpetrators, including their mother who neglected them. And now they are all in jail. And the case is still on. So we also have people who are there to rescue them. Yes.
So my next question is, what happens if the same situation is for men who are raped by men or men raped by women? Like, we actually, someone in the chat, Jean, is actually saying it's common for SBGV debates to drift towards males being portrayed as perpetrators and females as victims, especially the feminists politicizing the issue, which should be a human rights issue. What steps are there to encourage more male victims to report, and what is politicizing of the issue part of the problem? So my question is, what happens if the victim is a male raped by a woman? Are the same steps taken? Is the consent only for women? Is the woman supposed to consent, or is it both parties? And I don't know. I hope you've understood my question.
Okay, so I think I can go first for this one. No, consent is not only for one party. Both parties have to consent, of course. Discrimination, similar treatment for everyone. It doesn't mean just because the woman has consented, it doesn't matter what the man wants. Both parties have to consent. And yes, there are cases in which, like the way you said, the cases in which actually the men are the survivors of sexual violence, and they're actually provided for in the Sexual Offences Act. Because let me give you just a bit of history. Before the enactment of the SOA, the Sexual Offences Act, the sexual offences were provided for in the penal code. But in the penal code, the terms that were used, or the wording that was used, it was sort of like to imply that only a man could rape a woman. So after the institution of the SOA in 2006, it now uses basically, like, how do I say it? It uses neutral language to show that any person could engage in sexual violence against any person. It doesn't mean that only women are the ones who can be survivors of sexual violence. And it is actually recognized in the law. We have sodomy, we have indecent acts, we have sexual assault. All of these things can fall under instances whereby the man is raped, whether by a woman or by another man. And if I may also add, it's not it's not about politicizing it as a women's rights issue. So just to sort of like give you a bit of context, there's a lot to be said in order for you to understand. But when we're talking about sexual and gender-based violence, even just let me just define it so that you can be able to understand. These are offenses that are perpetrated to a person on the basis of the society's gendered norms and structures and views and all those things. So for example, society, the way we've been brought up sadly is that, for example, there are certain things which are for men and certain things which are for women. So similarly, there are certain things which are like, it's like women are weaker, so women are the ones who are likely to be, like violated, yet men are supposed to be strong, and like it doesn't seem like they would ever be survivors of such an attack. So it boils down to the gendered norms and like basically what society has forced us to think about each gender. That's why even it's harder, for example, for a male survivor to come forward and say, like, I am a survivor also. So it's not about politicizing it as a women's rights issue, but we also have to consider the gendered roles and also the numbers. I'm not saying that women are not being violated, they are. But if you look at the numbers, for example, it's so high because so many women are undergoing SGBV to the point that it's a pandemic, guys. It's like corona, it's like HIV. And even yet, it's not a disease. So it has to be talked about so that people can be able to understand how messed up it is. Yeah.
Corporal Caroline, you can go ahead before I comment.
To add on that, I think the percentage of men being raped to women being raped is minimal, whereby you find sometimes even many men are being abused, but they fear coming out to share their issues unless they share with friends or relatives. Then the friends or the relatives comes out to report the issue because maybe they feel demoralized, they feel ashamed, they fear coming out because they might be seen that they might fear for people to know that they have been abused. So it is good also for them to get this message that whenever they are abused, they should come out, because this is a two-way. When a man is sexually abused, he should report.
Thank you. I actually think more men are supposed to be empowered, because most men feel ashamed to go report, I was raped. Probably it's demeaning, you're not a man enough because of how the society has made it happen. And I think we should create more awareness to the men. That is why most men are actually mentally disabled than women, because women can talk, women report. But if you as a man, you're sexually assaulted and you go report, the society, your friends demean you. And I think we should stop that stigma and create more awareness about more men actually speaking out. So my next question is there any advice or protection measure in place in case a victim feels threatened? And in this case, mostly the guy who is the victim. Because the girl, there are so many ways the girl can be protected. They'll be taken for counseling, So what happens to the guy?
I was hoping the corporal would go first, but I can also go first. Okay, so first and foremost, you can always make a report even if you feel threatened. So it doesn't mean you have to wait for something to happen so that you can run to the police. You can make a report even if you feel your life is in danger, your safety is in danger. You can also make a report to, okay, this one is a bit of a longer process, but even in the instance whereby you feel like your rights are threatened, this means that, but they haven't been violated yet, they're just threatened. You can actually make an application. So there's so many instances, and there's actually, you can go for a protection order, and okay, but this one is, no, it's actually for both parties, both men and women can go for a protection order if you feel you are under threat to undergo any form of domestic violence specifically. That's now especially for persons in any intimate partner relationship. If you're married, it's actually protected under the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act. So I'm sure the corporal has more information there. So let me just pass it on to her.
Also, to add on that, we should not also deal on sexual assault. We have also the domestic violence, because you find even men are assaulted by their wives and they fear to come out to report the issue. You can find somebody has been assaulted, even they fear going to hospital. So it is good for them to get this awareness that they should report these issues. Sometimes even we receive reports from the chiefs that there is a lady who has been assaulting the husband in the house and they fear coming out to report the matter. So I think they should be getting the awareness that they should also report their issues to the police for action to be taken. Even we can pass this information through the barazas so that they can get the awareness, even through the chiefs.
You know, I always had this question, is there rape in marriage? It's actually a debate I've had with my friends, and some are like, yes, there's rape in marriage. Some are like, no, there's no rape in marriage because you consented to be fully your partners, you know. So is there rape in marriage?
Let me just answer it, because I talked about the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act. So this act was enacted in 2015, and it actually recognizes marital rape because it categorizes domestic violence to include sexual violence in marital relations or during marriage. So this myth, let me just break it here. This myth of when you get married, you've given consent forever, it is just that, it's a myth. It doesn't mean when you get married, you know, your rights are less, you only have half the number of rights because now you're married. There's nothing like that. So even during marriage, there has to be respect to the security of the person. That is a human right, which must be respected by everyone, including your husband or your spouse and any person you are in an intimate partner relationship with. So it actually is recognized under the law, which means that yeah, it is, you know, indirectly, it's not in the Sexual Offences Act. It's only recognized with reference to getting a protection order in that act that I've just talked about. And there's of course a lot of problems when it comes to prosecution. Like, for example, how do you prove that your husband raped you at this time? You know, you didn't give consent. So previously, the only instances that have been majorly successfully prosecuted have been when it has been corroborated, if I may use that term, like supported, yeah, with domestic violence, like domestic abuse. So if they see physical injury or anything that can accompany your statements to show that actually, you know, you were raped. But in other instances, there is still a lot of debate going around it because we live in a very patriarchal society whereby many people believe that, you know, still hold the notion that even the wife is a property to the husband and all those, you know, like backward thoughts. So, but it definitely is.
To add on that a
I'm
little
done
bit,
with
for sex, there must be consent. So even if you are married to somebody, you have to consent. You can't just come and tell me we have to do this because you are married. No, you have to consent for the act.
So there is rape in marriage. So I'm done with my questions. I'll ask the last one at the end, but I'm opening it to the audience. There are some questions on the chat. I'll read them. Do you believe GBV in general affects the economy?
It definitely does. I'm gonna go back to my numbers, my statistics. If you check, let me even give you like a very practical example. if you see the number of girls that are getting pregnant, not only in 2020, like for example, there's a report that I was reading again, which showed that even last year there were around 11,000 cases of girls being pregnant, I think in Nairobi, because Nairobi is the county with the highest number, Nairobi, Kakamega, and I can't remember the third one. So you find in these instances, most of these are, the higher risk age bracket is adolescent girls, young girls. These girls are probably in school or they're supposed to be in school. And the best way to empower young girls, including economic empowerment of young girls, is through ensuring that they continue with their education to completion, not just primary school level, but they continue with their education to completion to ensure they have more opportunities to the same extent as the boys do. But you find that when these girls undergo sexual violence, very many of them become pregnant because they don't have the capability, of course, to negotiate safe sex. That's impossible. So many of these girls become pregnant and they don't have many options afterwards because, like, what will you do? So many of them end up dropping out of school or they're forced to even get married to the perpetrators in the instances whereby they come from, certain communities. So many of these girls, basically, like, their very bright future is cut short. And there's a direct relation between educating women and girls with what is it called? The economy, the country's economy. Because if a girl is educated, she has more opportunities, she will get a job, she will contribute to the turnover of, not really turnover, but basically to the capital income of the country. And this will, of course, contribute to the GDP and the growth of the country as a whole. But the minute someone is not able to educate themselves, the minute someone has lesser opportunities, and you remember this is a very competitive world, if we're speaking, tusidanganyane, it's a very competitive world, and you're fighting for the same positions as the men do. So you need to be as educated, if not more, to be able to take those steps, to be able to get those opportunities. So it directly, it directly affects a girl's ability to be empowered, especially economically empowered, even for those who are not adolescents. It also, of course, due to the effects, these mental effects, someone may not be able to continue. To a certain extent, sexual violence even leads to death. So of course, that's someone who is not available to contribute to the economy, to contribute to their families' advancement. So it definitely does. Yes, and it will also increase dependency ratio. Thank you, Timothy. Yeah, so it does.
How? So thank you very much. I actually think it does. And there's always this quote, when you educate one girl, it's like you've educated the whole society. So the next question is, how about women who use sexual violence as a tool to extort men?
Oh, okay, that one is a tough one. I think, of course, it is wrong. There is no justifying it. Just because we're talking about this doesn't mean we justify any action that any woman will do towards another man. Of course, that one is wrong. So I don't know what else I can say about it. Maybe the corporal can go.
Yes, there are women who are trying to extort money. Like even this early morning, I was dealing with one issue. A lady is trying to pretend that she was impregnated by a man. So she said that she was assaulted by that man and she needs her to be paid, or the man should come back and stay with her for the pregnancy, and yet she's not pregnant. So we had to investigate and deal with them. So you find most women using such issues to extort money from men. Or even sometimes a lady can come out and say that I was raped for them to be paid. So I think what we should do is not to encourage that payment.
So what actions do the ladies undergo? You see, like the case you were dealing with it in the morning, was the lady arrested? Was she bailed? Like, what steps are there?
You see, now we had to chide the lady for giving false information because she came to the police station and lied that she was assaulted. She said that she was pregnant and then she miscarried, of which it was not true. She lied to me that she was treated and admitted in a certain hospital, and I had to follow up, and I found that it was not true. So I have to charge her with the offense of giving false information to discourage such other people like her coming to the police station and give lies in order for them to extort money.
Someone is actually saying you are really very fair. So the last question, when you said that there is rape in marriage, how do you differentiate between consensual? How do you differentiate? Okay, let me just try and look for that question. Here is it. Where do you draw the line between consent and conjugal rights in marriage? Because there is rape in marriage. So how do you guys draw the line?
You have to consent, and the ingredients of that rape, when we want to prosecute the perpetrators, we have to look, was there any strangulations? Maybe you struggled, you have sustained some injuries. So those are the things that we look. Because when you just come out and say that I was raped and you have no evidence and you are still a wife, you have to prove that you were raped.
Actually, that's interesting. I would give the audience, two of you, you can raise your hand to ask the last questions as we wrap the session. It has been insightful. I have really learned a lot. Anyone from the audience who wants to ask the panelists a question or something you think we did not answer? In the next 1 minute, if there is no one, I think we are all okay and we've learned a lot. I think silence is as good as we are okay. Thank you very much to the panelists. It's been an insightful session. I have actually been educated a lot, and I actually think this is something we can do it even at different levels, probably in high school, in different schools. We should be having such sessions. The government can actually advocate for such, even in school. I think there should be like a syllabus in like the way we do life skills where like a whole 3 or 4 months students are taught about sexual assault and GBV. It has actually been amazing. Thank you for sacrificing your precious time to be here. You have busy schedules, but you actually opted to have this time to be with us and educate us. And thank you to the wonderful audience. Without you guys, this thing wouldn't be possible. And we have 2 more days to go for the Strathmore students, because you know tomorrow we are dealing about alcohol and substance abuse. Then on Thursday, as we wrap up, is about mental health. And we wish you all the best in your festives. Thank you very much. I will return it back to Jean Mitch to end the session. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sumaya, for the job well done. Thank you so much, Marion, for taking your time to prepare for this session and sharing with us as much as you can. Thank you so much, Corporal Caroline, as well, for taking your time and going out of your way to join us. Just basic students who want to learn more. I'm very grateful. I would like to recognize the attendance of the following: Corporal Klaus Abdallah, also who work with Corporal Caroline, Corporal Emily Mbaire, and Superintendent of Police, Madam Jane. I am very grateful for you gracing us. I am am touched. And thank you so much for sparing time, Marion and Corporal Caroline, to inform us and educate us about. Looking forward to working more with you. All right. So I don't think if there's nothing else, probably we can get closing remarks from our president, then we close the session. Donna, in a position to?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Jen Mitch, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Corporal Caroline, Marion as well. This has been such an amazing session. I would like to thank everyone else who has come here. Hope you have learned a thing or two. Sumaya, you've done an amazing job as well. It's been very informative. I've learned so many things, and we will definitely share the information that we have known. So as of now, I would like to wish you all a wonderful evening and a Merry Christmas in advance. Take care and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Have a very lovely evening and looking forward to engaging with you the rest of the week.